evening. Indian and Cambodian foreign ministers co-chaired the 11th ministerial meeting of the Mekong Ganga Cooperation virtually in a year that marks a significant milestone in cooperation under the rubric of this subgrouping, as the initiative has now completed 20 years. It was decided today that practical workshops will be held to accelerate post-pandemic recovery and exchange ideas to promote global health. So our in focus tonight is Mekong Ganga Cooperation, building on civilizational ties. Besides that, Sports Minister Anurag Thakur has rolled out Hamara Victory Punch campaign on social media to cheer for the Indian contingent for Tokyo and other major developments in News Night tonight. I'm Munmun Bhattacharya. First up, the headlines. BJP hits back at opposition's offensive on centre's statement that no deaths due to lack of oxygen reported by states. BJP accuses the opposition of being insensitive and politicizing the issue, says states did not report any such case. BJP takes on the Aam Aadmi Party government for giving contradictory statements inside and outside courts. India continues to combat the COVID-19 pandemic. Around 42,000 cases reported in the last 24 hours, less than 50,000 daily cases reported in the last 24 days. Recovery rate stands at 97.36%. Over 41 crore, 54 lakh people vaccinated in India so far. The 11th ministerial meeting of Mekong Ganga Cooperation held virtually, co-chaired by India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar and his Cambodian counterpart. Member nations agree to hold practical workshops to accelerate post-pandemic socio-economic recovery. In a major step towards boosting India's defence sector, DRDO successfully flight tests new generation Akash missile, a surface-to-air missile from integrated test range off the coast of Odisha. DRDO also successfully flight tests indigenously developed low-weight fire and forget man portable anti-tank guided missile in a boost to self-defence. Eid al-Zuha festivities take place across India. People offer namaz in keeping with COVID protocol and exchange Eid greetings. President and Prime Minister extend Eid greetings to the nation. Tokyo Olympics kick off amid the COVID-19 pandemic. Women's softball event. Baseball and football matches start. World champion US loses to Sweden in the very first match of women's soccer. Tokyo Olympics is set to officially start from the 23rd of July, Brisbane in Australia to host the 2032 Olympics. Cheering for the Indian contingent for Tokyo Olympics, Sports Minister Anurag Thakur rolls out Hamara Victory Punch campaign on social media, appeals to Indians to tag 5 friends or family members to show their support for the Indian Olympics team. Our top focus tonight, India continues to combat the COVID-19 pandemic. Number of COVID cases continue to decline in the country. Around 42,000 cases were reported in the last 24 hours, and that's less than 50,000 daily cases have been reported in the last 24 days. Recovery rate is climbing up. It now stands at 97.36%, and India's vaccination drive is also progressing with over 41 crore 54 lakh people being vaccinated in the country so far.
India continues to fight the COVID-19 pandemic, with the new cases continue to fall below 50,000 from past 24 days. Nation has reported 3,3,90,687 total recoveries across the country so far, while 36,977 patients recovered during last 24 hours. The recovery rate currently stands at 97.36%, which represents the continuous upward trend. Over 42,000 new cases were reported in last 24 hours, and active case load now stands at 4,07,170, and active cases are now only 1.30% of total positive cases. Weekly positivity rate remains below 5% and currently stands at 2.09%. In Uttar Pradesh, Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath held a review meet with Team 9 officials and took stock of COVID-19 situation in the state. Active cases in the state now remains below 1,036.
30 अप्रैल के बाद से प्रदेश में निरंतर एक्टिव केस की संख्या में गिरावट आ रही है, घटकर के 1036 रह गई है। जो डेली पॉजिटिविटी रेट है प्रदेश का, वो इस समय अपने न्यूनतम स्तर पर 0.02% पर चल रहा है।
In view of prevailing situation in the country, Kavod Yatra has also been suspended in Bihar. Devotees are advised to offer prayers at home. In Bangalore, numbers of micro-containment zone has been increased from 44 to 60. Vaccines are among the foremost contribution in the fight against COVID-19. Marching ahead on this, vaccination drive has gained further momentum. Large numbers of women gathered at dedicated COVID vaccination center for pregnant and lactating women in Bhubaneswar.
यहाँ का प्रायोरिटी अच्छा है। जब मैं पहले आई सिक्योरिटी पुलिस जो नर्स है, मुझे पहले प्रायोरिटी दिया गया। हम जब आए पुलिस वालों ने हमको वैक्सीनेशन सेंटर पे लाए, हम वैक्सीनेशन दे दिया।
Country's COVID-19 vaccination coverage has exceeded 41.76 crores. More than 20.83 lakh vaccine doses administered on Wednesday. More than 43.25 crore vaccine doses have been provided to states and UTs so far through all sources, and a further 53,38,210 doses are in the pipeline. More than 2.88 crore unutilized COVID vaccine doses are still available with the UTs and states and private hospitals to be administered. Government is committed to accelerating the pace and expanding the scope of COVID-19 vaccination throughout the country with the combined efforts of all. Bureau Report, DD India.
Well, the BJP has hit back at the opposition's offensive on the centre's statement that no deaths due to lack of oxygen were reported by states. BJP accused the opposition of being insensitive and politicizing the issue, saying states did not report any such case with regard to COVID-19. BJP took on the Aam Aadmi Party government as well, accusing it of giving contradictory statements inside and outside courts.
Politics has intensified on the statement given by the central government in Parliament on Tuesday that no state UT reported deaths of COVID-19 patients due to lack of liquid medical oxygen during the second wave. The BJP on Wednesday hit back at its rivals amid a row over the government's reply in Parliament on the matter. BJP spokesperson Sambit Patra blamed the Congress and the Aam Aadmi Party for not sharing the data from the state where they are in power.
आपकी महाराष्ट्र की सरकार, आपकी छत्तीसगढ़ की सरकार जब ये खुद मान रही हैं कि यहां ऑक्सीजन की शॉर्टेज के कारण डेथ नहीं हुआ, आप ट्वीट करके पूरे देश में भ्रम फैला रहे हैं। और आज मैं मीडिया से भी कहूंगा कि ये लोग तो इट इज एक्सपेक्टेड कि ये लोग तो झूठ बोलेंगे, भ्रम फैलाएंगे, अफरा तफरी का माहौल, कंफ्यूजन का माहौल बनाने की चेष्टा देश में करेंगे। मगर हाथ जोड़ के चतुर्थ स्तंभ मीडिया से भी ये निवेदन है कि आप इन लोगों को एक्सपोज करिए।
Sambit Patra said that AAP leaders claimed deaths due to a shortage of oxygen but did not report the same to the centre.
ऑक्सीजन शॉर्टेज के कारण इनकी मृत्यु नहीं हुई है, ये अरविंद केजरीवाल जी की सरकार लिखित में अपनी कमेटी की रिपोर्ट को दिल्ली हाई कोर्ट को सबमिट करती है। अरविंद केजरीवाल जी, कल आप इस पे सवाल पूछ रहे थे, मनीष सिसोदिया जी पूछ रहे थे, आप बताइए क्या आपकी सरकार ने जो केंद्र को आंकड़े दिए हैं उसमें से एक भी मरीज की मृत्यु ऑक्सीजन शॉर्टेज के कारण हुआ है, ऐसा लिख के दिया है क्या? टीवी में कुछ और टीवी के बाहर कुछ, ये राजनीति रुकनी चाहिए।
On Tuesday, the Prime Minister had also discussed the COVID situation and vaccination to the people with floor leaders of both houses of Parliament. He said that the pandemic should not be a matter of politics and is a matter of concern for the entire humanity. The Prime Minister had apprised the leaders of all the parties about the work done by the government, while the Congress and the AAP abstained from the meeting that was called by the Prime Minister.
प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी जी ने थर्ड वेव की प्रिपरेशन के लिए बुलाया। हम जानना चाहते हैं, देश जानना चाहता है कि कांग्रेस पार्टी और आम आदमी पार्टी उससे नदारद क्यों रही। आप मीटिंग में जाएंगे नहीं और बाद में आप लोग कहेंगे कि प्रधानमंत्री जी ने हमें बताया नहीं, प्रधानमंत्री जी ने हमें चेताया नहीं। आप राजनीति करते हैं। आम आदमी पार्टी ने कहा कि हम कोविड के बारे में सुनना नहीं चाहते हैं।
While many states also claimed no deaths due to shortage of oxygen.
राज्य के अंदर कोई भी सरकारी अस्पताल या प्राइवेट अस्पताल जहां हमारे कोविड के लोगों का इलाज हो रहा था, किसी भी अस्पताल के बेड पे हमने ऑक्सीजन की कमी नहीं होने दी थी। ये अब संसद का सत्र शुरू हुआ है, इन लोगों के पास मुद्दा है नहीं।
ऑक्सीजन की कमी के कारण कोई मृत्यु नहीं हुई है और सारी व्यवस्थाएं हम लोगों ने की है। दिक्कतें जरूर आई हैं, लेकिन उसकी उपलब्धता हम लोगों ने लगातार की है।
ऑक्सीजन की किल्लत के वजह से महाराष्ट्र में किसी भी रुग्ण की मृत्यु नहीं हुई है, ऐसा एफिडेविट हमने कोर्ट में भी दिया है और ये वास्तव है।
जहाँ तक छत्तीसगढ़ का सवाल है, ये सही है कि ऑक्सीजन से रिपोर्टेड कमी के चलते रिपोर्टेड डेथ्स नहीं है, हम सरप्लस स्टेट रहे।
Opposition parties including the Congress accused the government of hiding the figures, but BJP clarified that the statement was based on figures provided by states and UTs as health is a state subject. No state sent any data about patients dying due to oxygen shortage. On Tuesday, Health Minister Mansukh Mandavia had also made it clear in the Rajya Sabha that the central government is working with complete transparency. The central government had given a written reply in Parliament that there is no data of deaths due to lack of oxygen in the country because the figures are being provided by state governments. Bureau Report, DD India.
Well, the 11th Mekong Ganga Cooperation meeting was held virtually today and it was co-chaired by India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar and his Cambodian counterpart Prak Sokhonn. It was attended by foreign ministers of the other 4 of its member states as well, which are Vietnam, Laos, Thailand and Myanmar. In his opening remarks, importantly, Dr. S. Jaishankar began by congratulating all the MGC member states on the successful completion of 20 years of Mekong Ganga Cooperation. He asserted that Mekong Ganga Cooperation stands on a strong foundation of shared geographical, historical and civilizational ties between our 6 countries. He further said that this oldest sub-regional cooperation is as much a celebration of our long and rich history of trade, cultural and people-to-people exchanges as it is a vehicle to advance modern-day cooperation in order to bring progress and prosperity to our people. Highlighting the importance of the Mekong region for India, Dr. Jaishankar said that India seeks multinational and multidimensional engagement with the Mekong countries. He pointed to the need to broaden the base of our partnership by identifying newer areas of cooperation. He also said that we aim to promote connectivity in the region in the broadest sense of the term, and that means that it's not just physical connectivity but also digital connectivity, economic connectivity and people-to-people connectivity. He pointed to the fact that member states are into the 2nd year of dealing with disruptions caused by the pandemic, and as he said, that experience shows that the virus does not respect national boundaries and it is therefore necessary that the response to the pandemic is also a collective and collaborative one. He also spoke on the way ahead. He said that the countries need to work together to find ways in which the MGC, that is Mekong Ganga Cooperation Partnership, can lend its strength to the fight against the COVID-19 pandemic. So 2 major areas of cooperation as far as India is concerned. One, ensuring greater connectivity in the region, and second, fighting the COVID-19 pandemic collectively. But before we tell you what transpired at the meeting in greater detail, let's take you back in time to understand when Mekong Ganga Cooperation started and the kind of progress it has made so far. So let's take a look at the very concept of Mekong Ganga Cooperation, how it was founded in the year 2000. Well, this is an initiative by 6 countries, India and 5 ASEAN countries, which are Thailand, Myanmar, Laos, Cambodia, as well as Vietnam. It was launched in 2000 at Vientiane in Laos. So this marked the start of what has now become a 20-year strong partnership. The aim is clear. It is to facilitate closer contacts among people of the 2 major river basins, the 2 rivers, Mekong River as well as Ganga River. Mekong connects many of those ASEAN countries. Cultural and commercial linkages among member countries down the centuries is also a key aim of Mekong Ganga Cooperation, and a lot of progress has been made to this effect so far in the last 20 years. We'll tell you more about it later. Let's move on now to the next slide, and that is working groups that have been set up. Well, there are 6 working groups that currently exist, one on education, the second one on tourism, the third one on culture, and we'll tell you more about the working groups. There is one working group on plans of action, another one on communication, another one on cooperation activities. So there are 6 working groups in all. And this is about the progress that has been made so far, starting from 2000 when the first Mekong Ganga Cooperation Ministerial meeting was held at Vientiane the same year when the launch of this subgrouping, which is extremely important from different perspectives, took place. In 2000, the Vientiane Declaration covered cooperation in 4 traditional areas, which were culture, tourism, transport and communication. And in 2012, India hosted the 6th Mekong Ganga Cooperation Ministerial meeting in New Delhi, where cooperation was widened from those 4 traditional areas into more areas. In 2016, the 7th ministerial meeting took place at Vientiane, where the Part of 6 short film was screened, which was focused on an Asian textiles museum, which is one of the biggest takeaways of this subgrouping so far, and that film was screened on that particular museum. In 2017, 8th MGC ministerial meeting at Manila, Philippines was held, where India called for expanding areas of cooperation. It's the same pitch that External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar made today at the 11th ministerial meeting. So India has been pushing to expand the frontiers of cooperation as far as Mekong Ganga cooperation is concerned over the years. In 2018, the 9th MGC ministerial meeting at Singapore was held, and it focused on all the 7 areas of cooperation. So what are those 7 areas of cooperation? We'll tell you next. Tourism, culture, education, science and technology, traditional medicine and health were some of those focus areas. Others were agriculture and allied sectors, water resources management, and there were even more sectors, and that's coming up in the next slide: transportation and communication, as well as MSME sector or small and medium enterprises sector. So this is about the progress made so far. In 2019, yet another meeting took place, the 10th MGC ministerial meeting at Bangkok, and India there was represented by our External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar, just like he represented India this time around. And he emphasized on better connectivity for a vibrant economic growth corridor. That connectivity push continues to date, with the External Affairs Minister saying that it is important that we have not just physical connectivity, but also digital connectivity, also economic connectivity and people-to-people connectivity. Virtual 11th MGC meeting was held today, and the key takeaways were that the MGC website was launched to mark the 20th anniversary. So this Mekong Ganga cooperation is the oldest sub-regional cooperation, and it is now 20 years strong, and we expect further progress going forward with a lot of focus on connectivity and combating the COVID-19 pandemic collectively going forward. Now let's take a look at the takeaways from the 11th ministerial meeting of the Mekong Ganga cooperation in greater detail. It was, as you know, co-chaired by External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar with his Cambodian counterpart today, and India's contribution to it over the years is also what we are getting you next.
The 11th ministerial meeting of Mekong Ganga cooperation, marking 20 years of cooperation between India and 6 ASEAN states: Cambodia, Lao PDR, Myanmar, Thailand and Vietnam. Commemorating 20 years of cooperation, a website dedicated to Mekong Ganga cooperation was launched, and a video documentary showcasing the achievements of the association and the diverse cultures and societies of the member countries was presented. Future areas of cooperation were also identified as culture, tourism, education, public health and traditional medicine, agriculture and allied sectors, water resources management, science and technology, transport and communications, MSMEs, skill development and capacity building, and quick impact project scheme. The meeting built on the progress made in the 10th Mekong Ganga Cooperation Ministerial meeting in Bangkok in 2019. At that meeting, India was represented by External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar. During the 2019 meeting, the new Mekong Ganga Cooperation Plan of Action for 2019-2022 was adopted. Jaishankar had emphasized on better connectivity between India and other member countries of the MGC bloc for developing a vibrant economic growth corridor. India has made significant cooperation to Mekong Ganga cooperation. It announced 50 new ITEC scholarships for MGC countries in areas of culture, tourism, engineering, management, teachers training, film directing, sound, lighting and stage management, in addition to 900 scholarships already given every year. India invited MGC partners as guests of honor in the 5th International Buddhist Conclave held in October 2016 in Delhi, Varanasi and Sarnath. 275 persons from 39 countries, including prominent Buddhist personalities from Cambodia, Lao PDR, Myanmar, Thailand and Vietnam had participated. India drafted a plan of action for 2016-18, which was endorsed as the core guideline for future action. A lot of work is underway in the sphere of infrastructure development. Member countries are developing transport networks, especially the East-West Corridor and the Trans-Asian Highway. When completed, the Asian Highway project is expected to link Singapore with New Delhi in South Asia via Kuala Lumpur, Ho Chi Minh City, Phnom Penh, Bangkok, Vientiane, Chiang Mai, Yangon, Mandalay, Kalemie, Tamu, Dhaka and Kolkata. Other areas of cooperation include air connectivity and IT infrastructure and networks. In the field of culture, the focus is on joint research in the field of music, dance, theatre forms. Focus is also to be given to conservation, preservation and protection of heritage sites and artifacts. Cooperation is also envisaged in the establishment of networking and twining arrangements among universities in the region. The translation of classics of MGC countries into other MGC languages is also a key focus area. All in all, the grouping aims to foster closer contacts between people residing in the basins of Mekong and Ganga, the two civilizational rivers on whose banks civilizations have sprung. Newsnight Desk, DD India.
And that brings us to our In Focus tonight, Mekong Ganga Cooperation, building on civilizational ties. To discuss that, we have with us Anil Wadhwa, former Secretary East MEA, former Ambassador, and Professor Swarn Singh with the School of International Studies at JNU. Welcome you both to Newsnight. I'll begin with you, Ambassador Wadhwa. Your thoughts on the very concept of Mekong Ganga Cooperation. It is 20 years old now. It is the oldest regional subgrouping. How do you look at the idea of bringing people that sprang on the banks of two civilizational rivers together over the years?
Idea sprung from the fact that India was looking at this subset of countries very closely after the Act East policy of India was launched. In those days, it was called the Look East policy. And the most focused areas when it started in 2000 was tourism and culture, and of course in the transportation and communication, basically with an idea to connect people together, and also therefore to bring about connectivity which would help in movement and transit of people, in transportation of goods and services, and also bring about a social and economic transformation. Now this subset becomes very important because the two cultures are connected, and this set of countries, those 5 countries plus India, which started the Mekong Ganga Cooperation, obviously are connected very deeply with long ties of culture and their own history. Therefore, moving forward, we've seen natural progression in the different fields, as we just saw in that documentary which was prepared. The number of fields that we have now entered into connect the people more and more together, and the focus is now on practical forms of cooperation. In fact, connectivity has become a more important form of cooperation with the Mekong Ganga Cooperation going forward. And I think the Mekong Ganga Cooperation countries are looking at utilizing the grants that India has put forward, big impact projects, and all these have proved very successful.
Absolutely. We'll discuss that as well. But before that, Professor Swarn Singh, 20 years back, was this a novel idea, bringing two civilizations with historical and cultural linkages together?
It's interesting to see why did it begin in 2000 November. The regional cooperation for Mekong sub-region goes back to 1957, but it stayed lackluster for a long time. It's only 1990s when these CLMV countries, which is Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar and Vietnam, they joined ASEAN. Then the excitement began, and gradually from 1995 onwards, so many countries, United States, China, ASEAN, Korea, Japan and India of course, came and built up these regional cooperation mechanisms with the Mekong Regional Cooperation, particularly the River Commission that was then guiding this kind of international cooperation. Now what sets India apart is interesting, because India from the very beginning underlined that it would not just focus on economic growth but social development, not just connectivity but people-to-people connectivity, and that is how this Ganga Mekong Cooperation Initiative was located in civilizational connectivity. And I think that sets India apart from other major partners of Mekong region entirely, which is cooperating now. Second point is that China has really become very influential player, has built about 11 dams, which has completely destroyed the whole environment of Mekong, water levels and everything else. The commission report that came out last year, Mekong River Commission report for 2020, says for the last decade, rainfall in that area, which was seen between 2008 to 2017, last year the rain has fallen to 50%. So drought is a major issue. That affects everything else, flora, fauna, fish, food, particularly the gold panners are in trouble. So in that sense, I think ASEAN and these CLMV countries are also looking at balancing that relationship. Countries like Cambodia, Laos are known as kind of vassal states today because of their Belt and Road Initiative really in bringing so much investment and debt to them. So CLMV, these four countries are themselves looking at engaging other countries with much greater vigor. And that's where India has these 10 identified areas in their action plan 2019-22, in which now I think we have clearly added pandemic. As you know, apart from other countries, Cambodia is itself very, very majorly affected by pandemic. And Cambodia also is looking at balancing that relationship, not being over dependent on China, but also opening up to India. And therefore areas like information technology, India's human resource, India's pharmaceuticals are going to be sectors which are going to be really privileged in that cooperation. So here, Cambodia, which is co-hosting in that sense, co-chairing with Indian foreign minister, is looking also how bilateral benefits can be drawn from here and build better relationship which is more balanced between India and China, other stakeholders. So I think 20 years is an interesting period where you had sometime up to 5 years, no ministerial meetings taking place. In 2007, they had twice ministerial meetings. So 10 meetings and going to be 11 meetings maybe this year.
Yes, 11.
In about 20 years time is quite a success story in that sense as far as India is concerned. Compared to other major players other than China, I think India has been a major country to engage these countries. And these are countries where India has a clear advantage in going there, investing and helping those nations, because the kind of appropriate technologies and investments they need, India clearly can provide those kind of facilities and technologies and trainings to them. So I think there is a win-win situation for both sides at this stage. And China's rather assertive and kind of Belt and Road Initiative, enormous investments have made these countries cautious, and then therefore they are looking at India with a little greater interest than they would have seen on India before. So I think here's an opportunity that India's pharma sector particularly can go and help these nations, and in that sense the kind of a new rapprochement, adding on another pillar, not just economic cooperation, technology transfers, but pharmaceutical cooperation here and delivery of medicine and vaccines is something which could put India at a great advantage in dealing with these CLMV countries, 4 countries which are, but of course there are 5 nations of ASEAN here which we are talking of: Myanmar, Laos, Thailand, Cambodia and Vietnam. This is how the Mekong River flows into this entire region. And I think clearly India has an advantage because we have kind of our own experiences with cleaning Ganga, for example, a major project we have had here. And in that sense, there are a lot of complementarities between India and these countries. And I see that the next decade, which is going to begin now, would see that kind of cooperation moving forward with advantage India in that sense.
Absolutely. In fact, one point that India has been emphasizing in previous meetings, it was also emphasized in the 11th ministerial meeting, and we are looking at the outcome document that has been released on our screens currently. And in that, the External Affairs Minister said that there is a need to expand areas of cooperation. So, Ambassador Wadhwa, we are looking at a lot of areas of cooperation already. There is a reference to need to ensure that there's greater health security between these member nations in the joint statement. What are the future areas of cooperation which can be additional to what we already have between the member states?
I think the quick impact projects with the Mekong Ganga Cooperation countries has been the most impactful so far. And we've seen how successful these quick impact projects have been. After the initial 24 projects that were completed, now India is looking at completing another 20-odd projects with the Mekong Ganga Cooperation countries. And these are all in varied fields, which essentially means that they get completed in a short period of time, have a lot of impact on the social sector, and of course they help the local population economically as well. That's one area. The second area, of course, is the fact that we have to look forward to speeding up our connectivity with the countries of this grouping. Because our Northeast, as you know, is 3.8% of our population, it's 8% of our geographical area, and it has 5,300 kilometers of international borders. Now, in order for our Northeast to develop, we must develop this connectivity. And already there are two major projects of connectivity that have been ongoing for quite some time, which have not been completed, unfortunately, due to a number of reasons, most recently the pandemic, and then of course the internal problems in Myanmar. So these are the trilateral highways that we've been talking about for a very long time, and eventually the Mekong Ganga Cooperation countries have determined that they would like to extend this trilateral highway, which will connect our Northeast via Myanmar into Thailand, to Laos, Vietnam and Cambodia. The second project is the Kaladan multimodal project, which will connect Kolkata port to Sitwe port in Myanmar, and then on by another route, which will be a boat route, the river route, on to Mizoram in India. Now that will be a game changer when it comes about, because it will bring about this trilateral connectivity between Kolkata in Myanmar, and eventually it will also connect Bangladesh because of our other connectivity projects which are ongoing. So with all these projects which are on the anvil, I think it's very important that we concentrate as India on the connectivity aspect. And in this connection, we must not forget that Prime Minister Modi in 2015 has already extended a $1 billion line of credit for digital connectivity and physical connectivity.
Yes.
Especially countries of this grouping can easily avail.
Absolutely. Professor Swarn saying key connectivity projects are currently at advanced stages, and Ambassador Wadhwa listed them. What are the potential areas in which connectivity can further expand? Are we also looking at greater maritime connectivity, greater air connectivity? Because that in turn will mean greater footfall of people, more tourism, greater cultural cooperation between peoples of all the 7 member states.
Creating cultural religious tourism circuits is already listed among the 10 items on the Plan of Action 2019-22. I think the most urgent need here in the region, which can provide India enormous goodwill and engagement, is that droughts and dams on Mekong Delta have affected severely about 60 million people's livelihoods. And that is a big challenge for this region, entire region's society. India can particularly go there and do skill development. I think that is again a major priority within India, but in skill development and therefore creating new livelihoods for themselves, for these people, is what can bring enormous goodwill to India. Again, something that India would be doing differently from other major stakeholders, from external stakeholders like ASEAN or Japan, Korea, China. And that could be an interesting area, and that also would include education, where already large number of fellowships, scholarships are allowed to these countries, but sometimes they're not fully utilized in that sense. So how to better utilize the fellowships and scholarships that are created, and what sectors then to orient and direct these kind of scholarships to be given. These are areas where you can train people to themselves be capable of managing their own livelihoods. And that would bring an enormous advantage to India. Other than that, I think 10 areas which are already earmarked in terms of all various other areas could also be somewhere where India can constantly build and do better than what we have done so far. But underlining, what I'm underlining here is that the consciousness of these countries in engaging India today is very different than compared to how it was in 1990s or even early 2000s. When initially the kind of interest was not as strong. And of course, from Indian side also, we have seen Foreign Minister Jaishankar attending these meetings one after another, and therefore meetings are becoming much more also regular in that sense, India engaging these 5 nations of ASEAN. So in that sense, I think there is a niche area which India has to explore, and therefore build that kind of cooperation and avoid kind of competition in aping others' strategies. which may not be, for example, bringing high technology when it comes to South Korea, bringing enormous investment, turnkey projects when it comes to China, may not be India's strength. I think appropriate technology, training, and that kind of areas is where skill building would be a major area to explore for India, so that people who are losing livelihoods because of this entire drought and dam scenario in the Delta can really come back and sort of not just create economic growth, but also social development, which has been originally the goal of how India's Mekong Ganga Cooperation Initiative was planned in the very beginning in year 2000. And that would see India constantly ensuring advantage and of course niche area, which puts India separate from other nations engaging. And in that sense, of course, once we engage these nations, it has advantage in terms of other platforms. For example, we also have BIMSTEC platform where India can have a greater advantage because of this goodwill generated, engaging ASEAN, engaging larger Indo-Pacific region. So this can be also in that sense brick building gradually, step by step, in sort of building close cooperation with some of these nations where India has niche advantage. And then
this is one instrument of India's outreach to the entire ASEAN region, like you said, and several areas of cooperation. Yes, Professor Swarn Singh and Ambassador Vadava, thank you so much for having joined us with your perspectives on this. So a lot of focus on the 3 C's, culture, connectivity, as well as the other C of commerce, and other areas of cooperation are also going strong, and we expect further expansion in those areas of cooperation going forward. And this will also tie in well with India's vision for further development in its northeast by way of connectivity projects in the region. Thank you so much, the two of you, for having joined us. Let's move on now. Virtually addressing the inaugural session of World Universities Summit organized by the O.P. Jindal Global University today, Vice President M. Venkaiah Naidu said that online education cannot be a substitute for conventional classroom learning. He also said that we need to develop a hybrid teaching model for future by combining the best elements of offline and online education. On this occasion, Professor D.P. Singh, Chairman, University Grants Commission, Professor Dr. C. Raj Kumar, Founding Vice Chancellor, O.P. Jindal Global University, and other distinguished university leaders from India and overseas faculty also attended the meeting.
Virtual education cannot be substitute for conventional classroom teaching and learning. Therefore, in the near future, we need to explore the possibility of a hybrid teaching model by combining the best practice of offline and online education to get the optimum learning outcomes, a model which the learner and the teacher will find both interactive and interesting. It should provide students with a knowledge base that prepares them to learn independently and creatively. Through proactive critical thinking, learners should be molded into leaders in their chosen fields, so that eventually they evolve into drivers of social change.
Union Education Minister Dharmendra Pradhan said that the new education policy will facilitate integration of education with skills and enable India to reap the demographic dividend.
Pandemic, we have ushered in an era of digital learning. The mode of pedagogy is going to stay, giving away to hybrid method of learning and knowledge dissemination. Our future planning, therefore, needs to fill a digital divide that currently prevails. With the advent of National Education Technology Forum, we will have the requisite technological boost to upgrade our pedagogy and learning outcomes. It will act as a force multiplier.
And now a quick roundup of other news from across the country.
The Defence Research and Development Organization DRDO successfully flight tested indigenously developed low-weight fire and forget man-portable anti-tank guided missile on Wednesday. The DRDO said the mission marked a major boost for the centre's Atmanirbhar Bharat campaign and would strengthen the Indian Army. The DRDO has successfully flight tested the new generation Akash missile Akash NG. The new surface-to-air missile was tested from integrated test range of the Odisha coast. Union Road Transport and Highways Minister Nitin Gadkari said that a draft notification has been issued declaring the Chaurasi Koshi Parikrama Marg as National Highway in Uttar Pradesh. Jammu and Kashmir Lieutenant Governor Manoj Sinha distributed small commercial vehicles to 250 youth from across the UT under the Mumkin scheme of the Mission Youth Program on the eve of Eid-ul-Azha. The ceremony was held in Srinagar. The Central Board of Secondary Education announced that it would conduct exams for private category candidates between 16th August and 15th September. It also said that result will be declared in the minimum possible time to avoid any difficulty to candidates in admission in higher education. The Bombay High Court will pronounce its verdict in pleas filed by former Maharashtra Home Minister Anil Deshmukh to quash the CBI FIR against him. Deshmukh has been booked under sections 120B relating to criminal conspiracy of the Indian Penal Code and section 7 relating to public servant taking gratification other than legal remuneration in respect of an official act of the Prevention of Corruption Act. Maharashtra is receiving heavy rainfall at many places. Mumbai and its suburban areas are witnessing intermittent rain. Heavy rain led to massive waterlogging and vehicular traffic across several locations. The Met Office has forecast rain in most parts of Konkan, central Maharashtra and Vidarbha, and in many places in Marathwada for the next 2 days. Raigad, Ratnagiri as well as Pune, Kolhapur, Satara districts have been issued red alert for 2 days. Orange alert has been issued for Mumbai, Thane and Palghar.
Eid-ul-Azha is being celebrated across the country today with religious fervour and solemnity. Let's take a look.
These are the festive images of Eid-ul-Azha celebrated from 5 different parts of the country in this time of COVID-19 pandemic. People celebrated Eid-ul-Azha in different states by adhering to COVID protocol. The holy festival of Eid-ul-Azha is one of the 2 important Eid celebrations within Islam, which falls on the 10th day of the Arabic month Dhul Hijjah. It is an occasion of joy and peace, while millions across the world celebrate the festival with great fervour. Though the enthusiasm for the festival has subdued due to COVID-19 pandemic for over a year, the excitement still remains high among the people. However, people no longer greet each other with hugs on Eid, but they wish one another by ensuring the poor to be a part of the celebration and happiness too. This is the most unique speciality of this festival. Delhi's Jama Masjid, along with several other mosques, saw devotees offering Eid namaz.
ईद-उल-अज़हा मुसलमानों का बड़ा त्यौहार है। इसमें तमाम मुसलमान अल्लाह ताला की इबादत करते हैं, अल्लाह ताला का शुक्र अदा करते हैं और परवरदिगार आलम से दुआएं करते हैं और तमाम लोगों से प्यार से मोहब्बत से मिलते हैं और गरीबों की बहुत ज़्यादा मदद करते हैं।
Union Minority Affairs Minister Mukhtar Abbas Naqvi offered Eid prayers by following social distancing norms at his residence in New Delhi.
जो कोरोना पैंडेमिक से पूरी दुनिया दो चार है, उससे वो चुनौतियां सामने हैं, इसलिए हिफाजत के साथ इबादत को पूरी दुनिया ने जो है वो तरजीह दी है। हमने भी घर पे ही नमाज अपने अदा की और दुआ की कि इस कोरोना पैंडेमिक से हमारे देश के लोगों को, पूरी दुनिया के आलम इंसानियत को निजात मिले।
The festival of Eid-ul-Azha was celebrated with traditional fervour in Jammu and Kashmir as well. People offered Eid prayers in different mosques. At the Eidgah in Lucknow, Maulana Firangi Mahali led the devotees in offering Eid namaz, adhering to COVID protocol.
ये नमाज में अल्लाह से दुआ की गई कि अल्लाह हमारे मुल्क और पूरी दुनिया से इस कोविड का खात्मा फरमा दे।
Eid-ul-Azha festival was celebrated in other parts of the country as well. People greeted each other on this occasion. Sweets were exchanged between Jawans of Border Security Forces 51st Battalion and Border Guards Bangladesh on the Indo-Bangladesh border in Phulbari in West Bengal on the occasion of Eid-ul-Azha. Indian and Pakistan armies exchanged sweets at Kaman Aman Setu in Uri, Titwal crossing in Tangdhar, Kuppara, Punch Rawalakot crossing point and Mendhar Hot Spring crossing point in Jammu and Kashmir's Punch on the occasion of Eid-ul-Azha. President Ramnath Kovind greeted the citizens on Eid-ul-Azha. In a tweet, President said, Eid Mubarak to all fellow citizens. Eid-ul-Zuha is a festival to express regard for the spirit of love and sacrifice and to work together for unity and fraternity in an inclusive society. Let us resolve to follow COVID-19 guidelines and work for happiness of all. Vice President M. Venkaiah Naidu, in a tweet, greeted the citizens on Eid ul-Azha. In a tweet, Vice President said, Eid Mubarak to all. Eid ul-Zuha, the festival of sacrifice, exemplifies ultimate devotion to God. May this Eid bring peace, harmony and happiness in our lives. Prime Minister Narendra Modi also greeted the citizens on the occasion of Eid ul-Azha. PM in a tweet said, Eid Mubarak, best wishes on Eid ul-Adha. May this day further the spirit of collective empathy, harmony and inclusivity in the service of greater good. Meanwhile, masked pilgrims in Saudi Arabia hurled pebbles at a giant wall in a symbolic stoning of the devil on Tuesday, while others performed the farewell walk around the Kaaba during the final part of this year's Hajj. Some of the measures implemented saw pilgrims receiving the small pebbles they used to perform the stoning ritual in a small bag to avoid crowding, where pilgrims traditionally pick up the stones. Bureau Report, DD India.
International news now. From devastating floods to destructive wildfires, the impact of accelerating climate change is increasingly visible worldwide. Extreme weather events have hit several parts of the world in the last few weeks. Europe has been ravaged by floods, and United States and Canada by heat waves. This report fills us in.
Until recently, climate change had been talked about as a future threat. Its front lines were portrayed as remote places like the Arctic, where polar bears are running out of sea. Sea level rise and extreme drought was a problem for the developing world. But in the past month, it has been the developed world which is bearing the brunt of nature's fury. In the past few days, floods in Germany engulfed streets and swallowed homes that had stood for more than a century in quiet village of Skuld. The southeast region of Bavaria in southern Germany is reeling after torrential rain battered the region over weekend. Over 150 people have died so far in the country's worst natural disaster in almost 6 decades. Damage was also caused in neighboring Belgium and the Netherlands. The country's southeast was hit by floods that left more than 37,000 homes without electricity. Belgian authorities said supply of clean drinking water was also a major concern. From floods to wildfires, the world is witnessing worst climate crisis in decades. A Canadian town of just 250, known more for its cool mountain air, burned to the ground in a wildfire that followed unprecedented heat. Wildfires raging across Canada, western United States, including a 2-week blaze in Oregon, belched smoke and soot that gusted eastward and caused harmful air pollution as far as the New York City. Meanwhile, firefighters assigned to the Union Pacific Fire Train in California are engaged in dousing train tracks with water from the roof of a moving train to protect the rails and surrounding area from the fast-moving Dixie Fire. Climate scientists have for decades warned that climate crisis would lead to more extreme weather. They said it would be deadly and would be more frequent. But many are expressing surprise that heat and rain records are being broken by such large margins. Several developed countries, including the US, have this year significantly increased their commitments to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. European Union last week unveiled an ambitious plan to put climate at the center of just about every development and economic initiative it has. Did India.
Tokyo Olympics kicked off amid the COVID-19 pandemic with women's softball event, baseball and football matches starting. In a shocker, world champion US lost to Sweden in the first match of women's soccer. Here's all the action from Tokyo.
The first sports event of the Tokyo 2020 Olympic Games began behind closed doors and tight security on Wednesday, with Japan taking an 8-1 victory against Australia in softball. Only buzzing cicadas and polite applause from a few hundred staff were heard as the shots cleared the fence after spectators were banned at the stadium in Fukushima. The US women's national soccer team suffered a shock 3-0 defeat to Sweden in their Tokyo 2020 debut in what marked an otherwise muted kickoff to Olympic soccer at Tokyo Stadium on Wednesday. The defeat ended America's 44-game unbeaten streak dating to January 2019. Staying with soccer, in a Group F clash, Brazil defeated China 5-0 on Wednesday in the women's tournament. Martha became the first player to score in 5 straight Olympics. In the earlier kickoff in Group E, Britain beat Chile 2-0 at the Sapporo Dome, with Manchester City forward Ellen White scoring twice, including the first goal at the Tokyo Games. British athletes will not miss on competing at the Tokyo 2020 Olympics despite coronavirus measures, said the British team's chef de mission Mark England on Wednesday in the wake of 6 competitors being forced to isolate under COVID-19 protocols. The athletes from Britain's track and field team and 2 staff members were identified as close contacts to an individual who tested positive for COVID-19 on their flight to Japan, the British Olympic Association said on Sunday. None of the 6 athletes were named. The group, who are currently at the team's preparation camp in Yokohama, would soon be back on the field and will be competing at the Games, said England.
No British athlete that has been pinned for track and trace, contact tracing, no British athlete will be at disadvantage in terms of entering the field of play in the Olympic competition. There's 100% no discussion about cancellation within the British delegation, nor within anybody in the Olympic. The competition starts.
World Health Organization head Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus has said that the Tokyo Olympics should go ahead to demonstrate to the world what can be achieved with the right plan and measures amid COVID-19 pandemic. Speaking to the International Olympic Committee members at their session in the Japanese capital, Tedros said the world needed the Olympics now as a celebration of hope. Rising COVID-19 cases in Tokyo have cast a shadow over an event that, having already been postponed last year because of the pandemic, is now taking place without spectators. Jets from Japan's Self-Defense Forces aerobatics teams, nicknamed the Blue Impulse, flew over the Olympic Stadium to skywrite the Olympic rings on Wednesday as a dry run for the opening ceremony. Spectators around the stadium waved and took out their smartphones to snap photos of passing planes. The opening ceremony of the Tokyo Olympics was postponed by a year and will begin this Friday. The Blue Impulse are scheduled to fly over the stadium on the opening day, but an exact timing will not be disclosed to the public to discourage spectators, as Tokyo is currently in the midst of a COVID-19 state of emergency. Bureau Report, DD India.
And we're also looking ahead to the 2032 Olympics, because Brisbane will host that Olympics after the International Olympic Committee approved the recommendation of its executive board. Brisbane, where a crowd had gathered to watch the announcement on big screens, becomes the 3rd Australian city to get the Games after Melbourne in 1956 and Sydney in 2000. Queensland's Gold Coast hosted the 2018 Commonwealth Games, and Australia will become only the 2nd country after the United States to host Summer Games in 3 different cities.
The International Olympic Committee has the honor to announce that the Games of the 35th Olympiad are awarded to Brisbane, Australia.
Brisbane will host the 2032 Olympics after the International Olympic Committee approved the recommendation of its executive board. Brisbane becomes the 3rd Australian city to get the Games after Melbourne in the year 1956 and Sydney in the year 2000. With this, Australia becomes only the 2nd country in the world after the United States to stage Summer Olympic Games in 3 different cities. Queensland's state capital had been the preferred host chosen in February and had earned the nod of the executive board last month.
Never in my lifetime did I think this was going to happen. We've done it Queensland, we've done it Brisbane. This is fantastic, it's amazing.
Several cities and countries had publicly expressed an interest in staging the 2032 Olympic Games, including Indonesia, Hungary's capital Budapest, China, Qatar's Doha, and Germany's Ruhr. Valley region. But in a new process adopted by the IOC that does not openly pit cities against each other, Brisbane had already moved ahead of any rival pack in February, having been selected as a preferred host. The city's bid had earned repeated praise from the IOC for its high percentage of existing venues, support from all levels of government and the private sector, experience in organizing major events and its favorable weather, among other things. The state of Queensland hosted the 2018 Commonwealth Games.
The Australian Olympic movement, the opportunity that this presents to all of our sports, to the next generation of athletes, to our Indigenous programs.
Australians celebrated Brisbane being named the host city of the 2032 Olympic Summer Games. Hundreds of people gathered at the Riverside South Bank, erupting, ensuring as the defining moments of the IOC session were broadcast on a big screen. Strict lockdowns in 3 of Australia's 6 states due to COVID-19 outbreaks limited the nationwide celebrations.
It's also an exciting moment for the International Olympic Committee because they work with Brisbane. They're a host which is fully aligned with our reforms, with Olympic Agenda 2020 +5. It's a very sustainable project.
The IOC overhauled its bidding rules in 2019 to reduce costs and make the process easier for cities. There are no official candidate cities campaigning ahead of the vote as has been the case in the past. Instead, the IOC picks a preferred host after talks with all interested cities and then puts that city to a vote at its session. Tokyo is hosting the postponed 2020 Olympics this week and Paris will stage the 2024 Games. Sports Desk, DD India.
And cheering for Indian contingent for Tokyo Olympics, Sports Minister Anurag Thakur rolled out the Hamara Victory Punch campaign on social media. He appealed to Indians to record a video and share it on social media, tagging 5 friends or family members to show their support for the Indian Olympics team.
India, India! ये है मेरी टीम और ये रहा टोक्यो ओलंपिक्स में हमारी टीम के खिलाड़ियों का मनोबल बढ़ाने के लिए हमारा विक्ट्री पंच। आइए टोक्यो में इंडिया को रिप्रेजेंट कर रहे भारतीय एथलीट्स का मनोबल बढ़ाए। आपको करना सिर्फ इतना है, अपने दोस्तों के साथ, अपने परिवार के साथ, अपनी टीम के साथ इंडिया को चीयर करते हुए हमारा विक्ट्री पंच वीडियो बनाए। आगे 5 लोगों को टैग करिए और चीयर फॉर इंडिया को एक जन आंदोलन बनाइए।
And Doordarshan's Newsnight team also joins the nation in the Cheer for India campaign, and this is our victory punch. Go for gold, Indian team. Let's take this movement forward with your participation. Thanks for watching.